You know how some species just can't catch a break? That's us, the Zelorans, in a nutshell. We spent centuries building the perfect society, complete with floating cities, quantum computing, and those ridiculous automated pet grooming stations that everyone insisted we needed. Really, who needs a 7-stage ionic fur cleaner for their Zelixian space hamster? But I digress. We were the epitome of what the Galactic Council called a civilized species, no wars for the past 1,000 years. Check. Sustainable energy grid powered by zero-point vacuum fluctuations. Double check. Universal healthcare that actually included dental. Triple check, and yes, that last one really impressed the humans when they found out. The thing about being peaceful for so long is that you start to believe everyone else must be just as enlightened. Sure, we had defense systems, mostly automated platforms that looked impressive during our yearly celebration of the arts and sciences. The kind that shot pretty lights into the sky and occasionally swatted away the random asteroid that ventured too close to our orbital habitats. Our isolation wasn't exactly intentional. We just happened to evolve in a sector of space that most species considered unfashionable, their words, not mine. Something about being too far from the galactic core's premium entertainment venues. Honestly, I never understood why watching binary stars merge was considered prime-time entertainment, but that's supposedly what all the cool species were into. The first signs that something was wrong came during what we call the Festival of Floating Lights. Imagine thousands of bioluminescent creatures released into the sky, each one genetically programmed to spell out poetry in our native language. Very pretentious, I know, but it was our thing. That's when our long-range sensors picked up the first anomalies. At first, our scientists thought it was a sensor malfunction. After all, what kind of species would travel in a formation that resembled a giant mouth? The Darkswarm, apparently. They weren't big on subtle metaphors. Surely the Galactic Council will help, our chief administrator said, adjusting his ceremonial robe for the 15th time during the emergency broadcast. We've paid our membership dues for the past 3 centuries. He conveniently forgot to mention that we'd been late with the last payment because someone not naming names had spent the allocated funds on a planet-wide meditation garden. The first transmission to the Council was met with an automated response: "Thank you for contacting the Galactic Council. Your request for emergency assistance has been received and will be processed in the order it was received. Current estimated response time 47 galactic standard cycles." When we pointed out that our entire civilization might be consumed by then, they sent another automated response congratulating us on our efficient communication skills and offering us a discount on our next membership renewal. The Darkswarm kept coming. Our long-range scans showed them consuming everything in their path. Asteroids, abandoned space stations, even the occasional unlucky solar wind monitoring probe, all gone, broken down into their base components and absorbed into their ever-growing mass. Maybe they're just hungry, suggested our head of xenological studies, who had clearly been spending too much time studying ancient human comedy shows. We could offer them our surplus of artisanal space algae. The Council's next response was even better. They sent us a pamphlet titled, "So You Think You're Being Invaded? A Comprehensive Guide to Peaceful Surrender and Cultural Integration." The accompanying note suggested we look on the bright side, at least we'd be part of a more dynamic social ecosystem. That's when we realized we needed to look elsewhere for help. The Council might have been the popular kids in the Galactic High School, but surely there were others out there. Others who knew what it was like to face extinction, while bureaucrats debated the proper form to file for emergency assistance. We just had to find them. And fast, because those sensor readings were getting awfully close to our outer colonies, and I'm pretty sure the Darkswarm weren't coming for a poetry reading. The thing about watching your civilization crumble is that it really puts a damper on your social calendar. Our outer colonies started going dark one by one, like someone unplugging festival lights, except instead of lights, it was entire populations of people. The Darkswarm's attack pattern made about as much sense as a quantum physics lecture delivered by a sleepwalking professor. They'd hit one colony, devour everything from the orbital platforms down to the subsurface mining equipment, then skip the next 3 systems only to double back like cosmic tourists who couldn't read a map. We sent emergency broadcasts to every supposedly civilized race in the galaxy. The Nexidians, those crystalline beings who prided themselves on their logical thinking, sent back a probability analysis showing we had a 0.0034% chance of survival. They offered to preserve our genetic material for future study, along with a bill for their computational services. The Volphids, masters of diplomatic doublespeak, outdid themselves. They expressed deepest concerns about our situation, while simultaneously explaining that their entire defense fleet was occupied with an emergency meditation retreat in the Gamma sector. Apparently, finding inner peace took priority over preventing genocide. Our Arcanian colony fell next. The Darkswarm didn't even bother with the usual consumption pattern, they just crashed one of our own cargo ships into the main reactor. The 7 million people evacuated in whatever would fly, creating a refugee crisis that would have made an excellent case study for the Council's Committee on Humanitarian Disasters. Too bad they were too busy debating the proper protocol for emergency meeting scheduling. The Miraxians, those 6 armed merchants who'd sold us our defense systems, suggested we upgrade to their premium package. When we pointed out that their basic package had failed to even slow down the Darkswarm, they offered us a 10% discount and free shipping. The shipping part was particularly useless, since we had no ports left in that sector to receive anything. That's when we started hearing whispers about the Outcasts, species that the Galactic Council had deemed too unstable for membership. The Pyraxians, who'd been rejected because their biology required them to occasionally set themselves on fire. The quantum nomads, kicked out because they kept shifting between dimensions during important council meetings. The void dancers, who no one really understood but everyone agreed were deeply unsettling at parties. Our first contact with them came through a Pyraxian salvage crew. They'd been picking through the remains of our Arcanian colony illegal, according to council law, but council law wasn't worth the quantum paper it was written on out here. You're looking for help in all the wrong places, their captain told us, his skin literally smoking from excitement. The council races, they're all talk and no action. Like watching a gas giant dance, lots of movement, zero substance. He introduced us to others. The quantum nomads showed up to half our meetings and phased through the walls for the other half, but when they were there, their tactical insights were unparalleled. The void dancers. Well, they mostly stood in corners whispering to empty space, but their ability to predict the Darkswarm's movements was uncanny. Each outcast species had their story. The gravediggers, massive beings who could manipulate gravitational fields, got kicked out for accidentally causing a moon to do a backflip. The Mindweavers were excluded because they couldn't help broadcasting their thoughts, which made for some incredibly awkward council sessions. The Time Striders had been banned for what they might do in the future, a temporal paradox that gave everyone headaches. We found them all gathering in what they called the Twilight Sectors, the spaces between official council territories. No laws, no rules, no pretentious ceremonies celebrating the signing of meaningless treaties. Just survivors, making do with whatever and whoever would help them survive. The Darkswarm hit our agricultural colonies next. Watching our food production centers disappear faster than snacks at a diplomatic function was bad enough. The refugee situation turned from crisis to catastrophe. Our people were scattered across any habitable rock that would take them, while the Council sent US guidelines for proper refugee documentation procedures. But the Outcasts. They opened their territories without question. The Pyraxians cleared entire habitat rings, somehow managing not to set them on fire in the process. The quantum nomads shared their dimension-shifting technology to hide our evacuation ships. Even the void dancers helped, though their idea of assistance involved teaching our children to speak to the spaces between stars, which, surprisingly, turned out to be more useful than anyone expected. Our Central Planning Committee was having fits. We can't associate with non-council races, they proclaimed from their increasingly isolated command center. Think of our reputation. What reputation? Our defense coordinator shot back. The reputation of a species about to be eaten by cosmic locusts. At least the Outcasts are doing something besides sending strongly worded disapproval notices. That's when we intercepted the transmission that would change everything. A message from a species so new to the galactic scene that they didn't even have a proper translation matrix yet. Their ships looked like they'd been cobbled together from spare parts and optimism. Their weapons systems appeared to violate several laws of physics, and their response to our situation was anything but diplomatic. Humans. They didn't have council membership. They didn't even have proper interstellar credentials. What they did have was a message that made every translator matrix have a small nervous breakdown. Yeah, we heard you need help, kicking some space bugs back to whatever hole they crawled out of. We're in. Also, does anyone else think the council's response time is total garbage, or is it just us? Finally, someone was speaking our language. The first human transmission we picked up was actually an entertainment broadcast. Our xenolinguists spent 3 days analyzing what they thought was a complex military code before realizing they were watching something called reality television. The fact that humans purposely filmed their social conflicts for entertainment told us a lot about what we were dealing with. But their next transmission caught our attention. It was a simple message broadcast on every frequency they could access. Hey, space friends getting their butts kicked by the big bad space bugs. We noticed the fancy council types are busy with their thumbs up there. Well, you get the idea. Want some help from the neighborhood troublemakers. The council had classified humans as pre-integration primitives with concerning aggressive tendencies. This designation came after human representatives attended exactly one council meeting, asked 47 inappropriate questions about military capabilities, and suggested solving a border dispute with something they called a demolition derby. Their ships looked like someone had described proper spaceship design to a child, then let that child build whatever they wanted. Engine configurations that made our physicists weep. Weapon systems that seemed to be held together by optimism and duct tape, which we later learned was actually a sacred human technological artifact. Your ships are impossible, our chief engineer complained during our first official video conference. They shouldn't be able to fly, let alone fight. Yeah, we get that a lot. The human admiral responded, taking a sip from a container marked coffee, don't touch or face death. But hey, impossible ships are harder to predict, right? Just ask the last bunch of pirates who tried to board one of our cruisers. Actually, you can't. They're still trying to figure out how they ended up in their own brig. Their status as non-council members turned out to be a point of pride. Those stuck-up star snobs wouldn't know a good idea if it kicked them in their bureaucratic behinds, declared their diplomatic representative, who insisted we call her chief of making things happen. Did you know they rejected our application because we suggested adding water slides to their central administrative building? The humans didn't just offer help, they practically kicked down our digital door with enthusiasm. While the council was still processing our 7th emergency application, humans were already sharing military strategies, weapon designs, and something they called space coffee, which violated several council substance regulations and quickly became currency among our defense forces. Their first official visit to our remaining central world involved 0 formal ceremonies, 2 accidental explosions, and a 3-hour session where they taught our tactical teams about guerrilla warfare, a concept that horrified our traditional military commanders and delighted our younger officers. Look, said their tactical advisor, drawing diagrams with a writing tool that kept changing colors. The Darkswarm thinks in straight lines. Big fleet, big targets, big boom. But humans, we're like that cousin nobody wants at family gatherings, unpredictable and really good at causing strategic chaos. When we showed them the Council's comprehensive guide to peaceful surrender, their response was to use it as target practice. Here's the thing about bullies, their commander explained, helping our engineers modify a mining laser into something they called a real big problem maker. They only understand one thing: getting punched in the face. Metaphorically speaking, although with these Darkswarm folks, we might need to get literal. The humans brought something else we desperately needed: hope, wrapped in a thick layer of absurd confidence. While our scientists calculated probable doom scenarios, humans were in our hangars, retrofitting civilian ships with makeshift weapons and teaching our pilots how to drift in zero gravity. But what if we fail? Our defense coordinator asked during a strategy session. Then we fail spectacularly and give them such a headache they'll remember us forever, the human captain responded, feet propped up on our sacred planning table. But between your brains, our crazy, and all these awesome outcast friends we're making, the Darkswarm won't know what hit them. Speaking of hitting things, who wants to learn about chainsaw attachments for spacesuits? The council would have been horrified. But watching our people learn to laugh again, to fight back with that strange human mix of determination and absurdity, we realized something important. Sometimes the best allies aren't the ones with the fanciest ships or the most impressive diplomatic credentials. Sometimes they're the ones crazy enough to look at an impossible situation and say, "Hold my coffee, this is going to be fun." The first meeting of what would become the Emergency Defense Coalition happened in an abandoned mining station on the edge of contested space. The humans insisted on calling it the Rebellion's super-secret clubhouse, until a void dancer pointed out that technically we weren't rebelling against anyone, we were just trying not to get eaten. Picture this: a conference room, designed for 20, now crammed with representatives from 30 different species. The Pyraxians had to stand near the ventilation shafts because they kept scorching the furniture. The quantum nomads flickered in and out of existence so often we had to record everything 3 times to make sure we didn't miss their input. And the humans, they brought snacks. Right, announced the human commander, spreading out actual paper maps because they insisted digital ones were too easy to hack. We've got a galaxy-sized problem, and a bunch of people nobody takes seriously. I'm thinking that makes us the perfect team. The gravediggers demonstrated their abilities by casually lifting their section of the floor, chair and all, apologizing for their excitement. The Mindweavers accidentally broadcast their lunch cravings to everyone in the room, leading to an awkward 5-minute break where everyone suddenly needed human snacks. Our own contribution seemed modest in comparison. We have extensive star charts our representative offered, and detailed cultural archives spanning thousands of years. Perfect, the human tactical officer exclaimed. Knowledge of terrain and enemy psychology, basic pillars of warfare. Plus your quantum computing will give us the edge in battle calculations. The Time Striders, usually so cryptic, laid out their vision. We've seen multiple futures, their speaker intoned. In the ones where we work together, not all of them end in disaster. Coming from a Time Strider, this was practically bubbling optimism. The Void Dancers offered their mysterious ability to predict enemy movements, though they insisted on explaining it through interpretive dance. The humans, showing surprising adaptability, just rolled with it and started taking notes in what they called contemporary dance notation. Look, said the human diplomat, standing on a chair for emphasis despite being one of the taller species present. The Council thinks we're all disasters waiting to happen. The Pyraxians are too volatile, the quantum nomads are dimensionally unreliable, we humans are dangerously unpredictable, and you Zelorans. You're about to prove them right by working with all of us. A cheer went up around the room, though the Mindweavers' telepathic celebration gave everyone a momentary headache. We drew up the coalition charter on the back of a human snack wrapper, because all our data pads had been fried by a Pyraxian's excited combustion. The first line read, we, the species deemed too weird, dangerous or irritating for proper galactic society, hereby agree to save everyone's collective butts. Each species signed in their own way. The quantum nomads quantum entangled their signature across multiple dimensions. The Void Dancers signed in a script that seemed to move when you weren't looking directly at it. The humans drew a smiley face next to their name. The Emergency Defense Coalition was born, though the humans kept trying to add of super amazing space friends to the end. We assigned roles based on each species' strengths. The Pyraxians would lead our strike forces, their natural combustive abilities perfect for surprise attacks. The Gravediggers would handle defense, using their powers to create gravitational shields around our worlds. The Time Striders agreed to provide strategic oversight. The Mindweavers would handle communication, and the Void Dancers. Well, we just told them to keep doing whatever it was they did. The humans naturally volunteered to bring the chaos. As we finalized our plans, a quantum nomad phased through the wall to deliver news the Darkswarm had just hit another of our colonies. The room fell silent. Well, said the human commander, crushing their empty snack container. Let's go introduce them to the neighborhood troublemakers. Our first coordinated attack against the Darkswarm started with what the humans called a good old-fashioned sucker punch. While the Darkswarm approached one of our remaining core worlds, expecting another easy meal, they instead got a face full of artificially generated micro-black holes, courtesy of the Gravediggers who'd been hiding behind our planet's moons. The humans had insisted on naming our battle plans after Earth food items. We launched Operation Hot Sauce, which mainly involved the Pyraxians setting themselves on fire inside specially modified ships and ramming straight through the Darkswarm's supposedly impenetrable outer shell. Turns out even space-consuming horrors don't like their dinner extra crispy. See? Sometimes the best solution is just setting stuff on fire, declared the human tactical officer, watching the Darkswarm recoil from their first taste of Pyraxian-powered plasma flames. The Council would have had 17 committee meetings just to discuss the safety violations in that single attack. The quantum nomads proved their worth by phasing entire sections of our fleet in and out of normal space. The Darkswarm would target a group of our ships, only to have them disappear and reappear behind enemy lines. Humans called this the now you see me, now you die maneuver, though our official records listed it as Tactical Displacement Strategy Delta. Our first major setback came when the Darkswarm adapted to our phase-shifting tactics. They started leaving behind what humans called space mines, though they looked more like angry cosmic jellyfish having existential crises. We lost 3 quantum nomad ships and a human cruiser before the Void Dancers somehow sensed the traps. But humans, as we were learning, had an almost pathological inability to accept defeat. So they can detect phase shifts now. Cool. Watch this, their solution involved strapping Pyraxian flame generators to unmanned drones, creating what they gleefully called spicy space surprises. The Darkswarm ate them anyway, which was exactly what we wanted. The Time Striders kept providing cryptic but useful warnings like "Don't be where the light falls twice," or "The void hungers most when full." The humans assigned a team specifically to decode these messages, which they dubbed Operation Fortune Cookie. Surprisingly, it worked better than our most advanced predictive algorithms. We had our victories. The Battle of the Crimson Nebula became famous when a combined force of gravediggers and human ships created an artificial singularity right in the middle of a Darkswarm fleet. The humans insisted on playing something called "Another One Bites the Dust" over all command channels during the entire operation. The Mindweavers discovered they could temporarily confuse the Darkswarm's hive mind by broadcasting concentrated waves of human advertisement jingles. Nothing disrupts a cosmic horror quite like being forced to think about discount furniture sales, our communications officer noted in his report. But the Darkswarm was learning. Each victory came at a higher cost. We lost the Pyraxian flagship when they attempted to ignite a gas giant to create a makeshift nova. The quantum nomads lost contact with 3 of their dimension-shifted outposts. Even the void dancers seemed more agitated than usual, their movements becoming erratic and their predictions less certain. The humans responded by getting even more creative. They introduced something they called cyber warfare into our tactical database. When we pointed out that the Darkswarm didn't use computers, they just grinned and said, "Everything processes information somehow. We just need to make them process the wrong information." That led to Operation Pizza Delivery, don't ask about the name, where we combined Mindweaver telepathic broadcasts with altered gravitational fields from the gravediggers. The result sent an entire Darkswarm fleet flying in circles, crashing into itself while trying to process the equivalent of a cosmic logic bomb. Our finest moment came during the defense of New Haven colony. The Darkswarm brought their largest fleet yet, expecting another direct confrontation. Instead, they found empty space. As they moved in to consume the colony, the humans initiated what they called the ultimate group hug. Quantum nomads phased in from 12 different dimensions simultaneously. Pyraxians ignited in a synchronized burn that would have made stellar choreographers weep. Gravediggers warped space itself into a pretzel shape that our physicists still can't explain. The void dancers did, something that hurt to look at directly. And the humans, they contributed by somehow turning the entire battlefield into what they called a giant game of cosmic pinball. The Darkswarm lost 3 hive ships in the first minute. By the 5th minute, they were retreating. The humans celebrated by teaching everyone their victory dances, which the void dancers actually performed better than they did. But we knew this was just the beginning. The Darkswarm would be back, probably with new adaptations and hunger. Looking around our command center at this impossible alliance, Pyraxians high-fiving humans with flame-wreathed hands, quantum nomads trying to learn human fist bumps. Without phasing through each other, void dancers attempting to explain their strategies through interpretive dance, while time striders nodded in 4 different temporal directions. Simultaneously, I realized something important. The Council had rejected us all for being unpredictable, dangerous, or impossible to understand. They never considered that those qualities might be exactly what the galaxy needed. The final battle began where it all started, above our homeworld. The Darkswarm arrived with a fleet so vast it blotted out the stars, their hive ships forming that signature mouth shape we'd come to hate. This time, though, we were ready. This time we had a plan that only this particular brand of crazy could conceive. The humans called it Operation Grand Finale. The void dancers had a name for it too, but it made everyone's teeth itch when they tried to pronounce it. Our tactical computers gave it a 2.3% chance of success. The humans said those were better odds than half their Monday mornings. The Darkswarm expected another hit-and-run battle. Instead, we gave them every species' greatest hits in one magnificent symphony of chaos. The quantum nomads began by phase-shifting the entire battlefield, not just our ships, but the empty space itself. The Darkswarm found themselves fighting in what the humans called quantum soup. The gravediggers orchestrated a gravitational ballet that would have made black holes dizzy. They created a complex web of gravitational fields, turning space itself into a maze of force vectors. The human engineers had suggested this formation after watching something called pinball machines. Pyraxian ships, retrofitted with human-designed thermal amplification systems, ignited in a synchronized pattern. The humans had dubbed this maneuver the Disco Inferno, though none of our species understood the reference. The result was a cascading wave of plasma fire that rode the Gravedigger's gravitational web straight into the heart of the Darkswarm fleet. The Mindweavers, who'd been practicing for weeks, launched what they called a psychic rickroll, apparently based on some ancient human psychological warfare technique. The Darkswarm's hive mind struggled to process the concentrated blast of human mimetic warfare, combined with Mindweaver telepathic algorithms. The Time Striders chose this moment to implement their part of the plan. They created localized temporal distortions, causing sections of the Darkswarm fleet to experience time at different rates. Some ships found themselves moving in slow motion, while others accelerated until they couldn't properly coordinate with their neighbors. That's when our human allies revealed their final surprise. They'd spent months teaching the Void Dancers about something called stage magic. As the Darkswarm reeled from our combined assault, the Void Dancers began their performance. They danced between dimensions, their movements creating patterns that somehow convinced reality itself to look the other way for a crucial few moments. The Darkswarm's supposedly unbreakable hive mind fractured. Ships collided with their own temporal echoes. Others found themselves suddenly occupying the same space as the plasma fire they'd been trying to avoid. A few apparently decided to evolve backwards, becoming increasingly primitive before dissolving into confused clouds of cosmic dust. The main hive ship, trapped in a temporal eddy, surrounded by quantum uncertainty, and bombarded by what the humans called the greatest hits of human civilization, finally did something no one had ever seen before. It attempted to surrender. The Galactic Council, which had been monitoring the situation from what they considered a safe distance, suddenly discovered unprecedented speed in their response protocols. Their representatives arrived just in time to watch the Darkswarm's supreme consciousness pledge allegiance to what they termed the Lunatic Coalition. "We should form a committee to discuss these unprecedented events," the Council's chief administrator suggested, watching as humans taught Pyraxians how to roast something called marshmallows using their natural flames. "Already did," our human commander replied, tossing them a datapad with the newly formalized Alliance Charter. "We took a vote while you were sending automated responses. Welcome to the new neighborhood." The Council's response was a masterpiece of diplomatic confusion. They spent 3 hours trying to cite regulations that our victory had already rendered obsolete. Meanwhile, the Darkswarm representatives were learning human victory dances from the Void Dancers, creating a spectacle that would give Council etiquette instructors nightmares for years to come. The Galactic Council's prestigious Hall of Unity now sports several modifications that would have been unthinkable before the war. A Pyraxian flame garden decorates the east wing, carefully maintained at temperatures that only slightly melt the nearby decorative statues. The quantum nomads installed their dimension-shifted meditation rooms, which sometimes randomly appear in different parts of the building. The humans contributed a water slide. Our coalition became the foundation for the new Galactic Alliance of Unified Species, though humans still occasionally try to sneak super amazing space friends into official documents. The old Council membership requirements were replaced with a simple question: what can you bring to the galactic community? Turns out, being different isn't a bug, it's a feature. The Darkswarm, under the influence of human entertainment broadcasts and Void Dancer philosophy, transformed their consumption-based society into something entirely new. They now run the galaxy's most successful recycling program, though we still keep a close eye on their dietary habits. Political meetings are certainly more interesting these days. Time Striders provide scheduling that somehow has everyone arriving exactly when needed, even if they left an hour later. Mindweavers ensure transparent negotiations, though we had to institute a no-broadcasting lunch cravings rule after the great snack crisis of last year. As for us Zelorans, we learned that sometimes the best civilizations aren't built on perfect order, but on embracing the chaos that comes with true diversity. Even if that chaos occasionally involves explaining to the Council why humans installed emergency dance party buttons in all government buildings.